Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pick Six podcast. Katie Mox and Will Brinson here. And as you know, this is our All 32 series, the series where we catch you up with insiders to give you all of the information that you need on every NFL team. And today we're talking Buffalo Bills with Bills beat reporter for Syracuse.com, as well as the host of Shout podcast, Matt Parrino. Matt, thanks so much for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm getting a little bit anxious here. I was just telling Will, what are we, like a little less than 12 days from the start of training camp? The summer vacation's almost over. I'm ready to get going here.
Yes.
I can't wait. I think what's interesting about the Bills is that, is this a, like, or actually, no, I'll ask Josh Allen first because I put him in tier. I like to promote my quarterback tiers article because I'm extremely self-indulgent. Josh Allen, no doubt, no brainer, easy pick for that first tier for me. I was surprised, like he was of the tier one is Mahomes, Burrow, and Allen. That's it, right? The pushback I got was one, Mahomes needs to be in his own tier, which whatever, that's fine. And then two, some people suggested that Josh Allen could even be in tier 2, which I thought was a little crazy. We're digging into it a bit, and it's like Brian Dable leaves, Daniel Jones takes this big step forward, and Josh Allen's turnovers go up. Is there any concern you think with Ken Dorsey, or is that really more of like first year as a play caller, adjusting to life with Josh Allen? Like, is there anything to worry about on that front when it comes to the quarterback and the OC there?
Well, I think that they had to work through a lot of things, and one of the things that I think that has been said this offseason that really opened my eyes a little bit was Isaiah McKenzie did the Tyler Dunn podcast, and he was talking about his impressions of that first year with Ken Dorsey. And he said he's got kind of that aggressive gunslinger mindset as a play caller. And so you saw a lot of deep shots last year. And I think that sometimes the offense takes the personality of the play caller. And I think one of the things that Dable did so well was really finding a way to matriculate the ball down the field consistently, find different ways. McKenzie specifically, like in that gadget role over the last couple of years, he wasn't doing much of any of that last season. They were missing that. So I think Brandon Beane is really good at evaluating when things go wrong, fixing them, right? Like early on in his tenure, he had Kelvin Benjamin, he had Andre Holmes, bigger body catch point guys. And then they went to the Smurfs model, right? John Brown, Cole Beasley, and it worked, right? That's their term, not mine. And so I think what they did last season was figure out, all right, what's going to work with Ken, and what do we have to figure out to add those elements that maybe we lost from the offense when Dable left. So they go out and they draft Dalton Kincaid. They go out and pay a lot of sneaky money to Deontay Hardy, who was really good in New Orleans a couple years ago. If he could stay healthy, I think they want him to be good. So is there concerns? Sure. But I think has the potential to be better in year 2. Dorsey does. And he has one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's funny you mentioned that about, people wanting to kind of tear him down now. It's so quick we forget we're literally less than 2 years removed from one of the best 2-game runs in playoff NFL history. He had 9 touchdowns in those 2 games. If they had gone on, I'd have been curious to see if he could have taken a run at the all-time NFL passing playoff record of 13 touchdowns.
I mean, I don't know, Brinson, and I feel like you've got a follow-up to that one about Josh Allen.
No, I mean, I think that, like, I think I'm surprised that.
Oh, well, his follow-up was to leave us. All right, well, Matt, let's move on from Josh Allen then. That is so Brinson and actually hilarious to happen. But all right,
I love it.
I do too. What is going on with the Stefon Diggs drama this offseason? Like, why are the Bills' vibes so weird right now?
Spent a lot of time thinking about this, and we don't have a lot of information to go off of, right? There's all of these various reports that we've heard over the last couple of weeks and months, and leading up to minicamp, I mean, Sean and Brandon really downplayed this whole thing. And our lasting image for the offseason was Diggs, arms raised, screaming at Josh Allen on the sidelines against Cincinnati. And so members of the local media consistently brought it up over the course of the offseason, and it was kept at bay. Like, everything's fine. Diggs is decompressing, and then he shows up and it goes haywire a little bit. I think Diggs, he's an answers guy, right? Like, he wants answers for his questions. And when he first got here, they went to the AFC title game. Everybody remembers the image of him watching the Chiefs celebrate their trip to the Super Bowl. They get really close the next year, almost ending in a better way, right? The only reason they lost is because their offense couldn't get on the field last, and Patrick Mahomes got the ball last. And then you go to 2022 when they bring in Von Miller, all the chips are on the table, and it almost feels like you took a step back in the way that you lost to Cincinnati. Now, there's a lot of reasons for why the season ended that it did, but if you're Stefon Diggs and you didn't like the way the offense evolved over the course of last season under Ken Dorsey, maybe you have a lot of questions, and maybe those questions weren't being answered adequately, and they had to get in a room, close all the doors, do a little yelling and screaming like a lot of I think families, right, have to do sometimes when you're around each other as much as they are. So I don't know. They're selling it as if it's much to do about nothing. Deion Dawkins was just on a radio show. Josh Allen was on a podcast. They're all doing the PR thing, right? But yeah, I think Sean McDermott saying he was very concerned was something that got my attention for sure.
Yeah, it's almost like it's this weird. So I keep the reference I keep using is the '90s Bad Boys Pistons. Like that's the Chiefs and the Bills are the Bulls. And I'm not saying Josh Allen's Michael Jordan, but I mean, dude has the skill set to be like insanely great. It's just like it's like the Chiefs sort of and the Bengals now too, maybe a little. It's like they've been so close, and this is a franchise that the 4 Super Bowl losses in a row, and then just really mediocre performance for the most part for like a lengthy time. Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane come in and turn him into a contender, and it's like we're always so quick to say, like, why can't you take that next step? Like, where's that next step? Why can't you take it? And it's hard to do that in the NFL, especially when Patrick Mahomes is in your conference. It's even harder, it's where it's like, like it internalizes as well. Like Diggs wants to take that next step, and it feels like that's the issue. Do you feel like maybe because last year is the prohibitive favorite, do you feel like maybe this year with all that's going on this offseason, everybody's pointing is like, oh, the Bills are going to be down, that maybe there's this like sneaky chip on the shoulder and maybe there's a little less pressure than there has been in years past?
Oh, it's not sneaky, Will. I mean, that chip is on the shoulder. I mean, I think Sean McDermott is reveling in all of this, right?
Yes.
Pick against them. Think that him have taken over the defense is going to cloud things in their building. I think this is exactly the position that they want to be in. It's why it's led me to saying that I think with an even stronger roster top to bottom on both sides of the ball this year, and you can't project healthiness, right? Like Micah Hyde goes down, Poyer played hurt all year last year. If that happens, they potentially could struggle. Although getting Tyler Rapp was a sneaky way to mitigate against those kind of possible problems. But I think you make a great point. I mean, look around the league at all of the elite quarterbacks, the elite teams, right? Patrick Mahomes has pretty much owned this thing, and Tom Brady snuck one in. The Rams went out and got a veteran quarterback in Matthew Stafford with a ready-made roster. But other than that, I mean, it's hard to win Super Bowls. And sometimes I think going through the pain of all of this, Deion Dawkins said it, I think it was yesterday on The Hurt, that going through all of these, like these heart-wrenching losses, I think basketball is I use it all the time, the great example of teams over the years, franchises that had to go through these hurt. I mean, I grew up in the Dallas Mavericks, Phoenix Suns, Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash era, when they were just the Sacramento Kings losing and losing and losing before you finally start to break through a little bit. And Dallas, it took them a couple years. They finally won that one championship. But I think they're right there. And Leonard Floyd is another guy. Like, nobody's talking about this addition because it happened late June or early June, right before mini camp. We get into this quiet part of the offseason. But if you go back to the beginning and look at some of those edge rushing lists for free agents, Floyd was kind of at the top of the list in terms of guys that you can go out and get. He wants to be in a situation where he could chase a Super Bowl, and he all of a sudden becomes probably your number 2 behind Von Miller. Greg Rousseau, there's a lot of hope for him. He had 8 sacks last year, took a step up from his rookie year, and he's probably going to grow even more. But without a shadow of a doubt what Leonard Floyd has done in this league, and I think that you feel comfortable about that. They've done that in a lot of different position rooms, and I think that that's where you have to be most excited if you're a Bills fan.
Let's talk about Von Miller, actually, Matt, because I think a reason why the Bills didn't go as far as they were projected to go last season was when Von Miller went down. And it does feel like his ACL tear is something that the Bills are going to want to monitor for the rest of this offseason and probably early in the year. Last year, they were aggressive about not playing him too much in blowouts. Should we expect to see more of that? Are they going to kind of slowly ramp him up? What do you think a snap count is going to look like early on?
Yeah, I don't expect to see him for the first month of the season, maybe even into that, week
Really?
6 area. I think he's even being smart about it. Like, he remembers years ago in Denver when he really pushed to get back. And I think when you do that, sometimes, you deal with more setbacks on the other end of it. So I think they're going to take him really slow. I think that's one of the things that motivated them to give a little money to Floyd. And now you have this really nice situation where you can lean on Floyd in the meantime. Rousseau is a guy that you're projecting to take another jump. I don't know if he's going to, reach that next tier necessarily, but he's a really consistent pass rusher. He's great against the run. His length is a problem. And then behind him, you have a couple question marks, AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham, who second-round picks that just haven't figured it out quite yet. But, man, I've been going back and watching some of the games from last season. Shaq Lawson was so sneaky good for them last year. We don't talk enough about him. Nobody wanted him this offseason. I mean, he just stayed on the market, fitting him in as a 4th, maybe 5th edge rusher, a former first-round pick. That's such a luxury for a team whose defensive line already, I think, has the potential to be better once Von Miller gets back. They were better against the run last year, but they weren't great. Go back and watch some of those regular season games, win against the Chiefs, win late against the Dolphins. Both those teams ran on them. Daquan Jones helped things, but I think Poona Ford coming over from Seattle, another sneaky under the radar one, he's going to take that to another level. So they're stronger, it seems like, everywhere. The one question remains is Tremaine Edmonds, him going on to Chicago, who ends up being the middle linebacker. They're probably going to have to rely on a very young, inexperienced player unless they want to do AJ Klein, who's played a lot of snaps for them over the years. But I think they want to go younger and faster, and that's why they drafted Dorian Williams. That's going to be interesting to see. But Von Miller put him on ice until maybe even like late October, early November.
I think that's probably smart. All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, the questions about the offense and the positions of running back and tight end. We'll talk about that next. So Brandon Beane mentioned, and I like how you referenced Beane as, when you're talking about the play calling stuff with Ken Dorsey, because I think it's probably a little under the radar in the sense of how much, like, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott remind me, the way that they work together reminds me of Pete Carroll and John Schneider. Does that seem fair? Brandon Beane was under Dave Gettleman's right-hand man in Carolina. Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator there. And then, they didn't jump at the same time, but essentially together. Like, they had to, McDermott had to go through the rigmarole of Doug Whaley because he was ensconced in that front office, and brought Brandon Beane up. How much of it, like, do you think, so Brandon Beane, I'm not like he's like telling what plays to call or anything like that, but he is, I think that's the way that they work together like that is really interesting. And talk about the offense and like Dalton Kincaid, he's like, Dalton Kincaid's gonna be out there. We're gonna split this guy out. I mean, so it's sort of a larger question about Brandon Beane, but also curious how Dalton Kincaid specifically will fit into that offense.
So it's so interesting. I love this conversation because it's one of the number one storylines I'm tracking over the course of this season. They have a blueprint set up that didn't quite really work last year, with Brandon Beane trading up and drafting Kyer Elam, and then him getting beat out by a 6th-round draft pick and Christian Benford to start the season. Now, they split time, but it was never Kyer Elam's job. And I think if you take a cornerback or really any skill position player on either side of the ball, the expectation is that you put them in a situation to have success. I mean, you look at the Chiefs last year on their run to the Super Bowl, they just took their lumps with all their rookies from round 1 to round 7, especially in the defensive side, to just get them used to things. And Elam, I just never felt like he got comfortable. And even going into this offseason, there's question marks again. Like, is Kyer Elam going to win that second cornerback job? I don't know. Christian Benford looked great in the spring. They brought back Dane Jackson because he's that valuable veteran. But I think there's got to be a little bit more synergy between the coaching staff and Brandon Beane, because he's getting heat for his drafts the last couple of years. And I think you have to be able to pair the evaluation with the plan for the player. So if they traded up and drafted Dalton Kincaid and we get to week 1 against the Jets and he gets a target or 2 for 10 yards on one catch, Bill's Mafia's head's going to explode because that's just not going to work. This guy, Daniel Jeremiah, was sitting there on the broadcast saying the NFL doesn't know what they're in for. Well, if you are Brandon Beane, you're probably looking over the table at Sean McDermott, Ken Dorsey, and saying, you better make them pay because we traded up, we gave up assets for this guy. It's an easy fit. There should be a plan for him. Ken Dorsey is playing coy about it all. He was asked about it at his press conference. What's the plan for him? He's like, well, he's got to get to learn us. We got to get to learn him. We'll see what happens. Well, no. You're not going to see what happens. You got to get this guy in the field, find a way for him to upgrade that intermediate short area, that slot presence. And Hardy maybe can do it. Sherfield coming over from Miami, he can be a piece of it. But Kincaid is a serious asset that they drafted him to be a playmaker and a difference maker in that area, take some of the pressure off Stefon Diggs. So I wonder if that was part of the conversations that they've had over the last couple of weeks and what he could mean for Diggs.
Bills Mafia is not a franchise that I would want coming down at my neck, but
easily top 5. I don't want them mad at me for, like,
I don't want no smoke. Yeah. If y'all are falling on tables for fun, I don't want to know what happens when you are pissed off. But in looking at the backfield, when you see the running back position, do you think that the Bills are set with James Cook and with Damian Harris?
I love the approach that they've taken at this position, and they had kind of like, an ace in the hole in Nyheim Hines. They never really unleashed him last year in the offense. Like, they didn't figure out a way. I think one of the conversations that they've probably had this offseason is like, okay, how do we fix that? Because we traded a 5th and Zach Moss to go get this guy. And then we only used him really on special teams. He had the 1 touchdown against the Dolphins on a nice reception from Josh Allen. But that's where he's great, like getting him involved in the passing game. And they got to find a way to do that more with him and James Cook, which they drafted him to be, right? Like, remember Brandon Beane talking about, hey, I just loved his tape, him catching balls 15, 20 yards down the field. Well, they didn't do much of that with him even last year. I think he's going to be the featured back in terms of how many touches he gets, but I think there's competition there with Damian Harris. I think Damian Harris is going to come in here on a 1-year deal. It's a contract year. He knows he's got to perform. And Ramondre Stevenson just basically took over that backfield the last couple of years in New England. And I think now, if I'm Damian Harris, I'm starving for opportunity because James Cook, smaller guy, how is he going to handle the workload? He was banged up a little bit at times last year. There could be huge opportunity. And then they doubled down in that style of back, going out and getting Latavius Murray, who wants to be in Buffalo, grew up in central New York, Syracuse, shout out Syracuse.com.
Yeah.
And, he's in here now. And I think you could be in a situation where you keep those 3 backs, the first 3 I talked about, fit Latavius Murray at his age, maybe on the practice squad, is one of those kind of guys that hangs out when you need me, call my number. I don't want a lot of early season carries. And he could be a really big piece for them maybe in November, December, just depending on how healthy they stay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is interesting because you keep expecting them to like, everybody's like, they're going to spend a 1st-round pick on a running back. It's like, they don't do that. Like, they're not like, like everybody thinks that's going to happen. We talk about the defensive side of the ball. All right, so the win totals and the division odds. I've been on division odds because I've been beating this one into the freaking ground. Win totals is fine too. I said that I think the Bills to win the AFC East now plus 125. Shout out to me for moving it from 130 to plus 130 to 125.
The Brinson model strikes again.
That's right. I mean, to me, Matt, this is like. It's not the full version, but sort of very similar. Last year with the Chiefs, they closed at plus 160 to win the AFC West. They win it by like Thanksgiving. They run away with it. And it was because the Chargers added Khalil Mack. The Raiders added Devontae Adams. The Broncos added Russell Wilson. And they traded away Tyreek Hill. And it feels like this is sort of similar where, the Pats are 8-1. Nobody's really considering them. But like the Dolphins are a very popular team to possibly win this division. And the Jets trade for Aaron Rodgers. And they are the team of the offseason. This is the Aaron Rodgers Jets offseason. And the Bills are just sitting there at plus 125. As the best team in this division for the last few years, the team that took it away from Tom Brady and the Patriots. They said, nah, this is ours now, and punched him in the mouth late in the season. They're not afraid to run it up on Belichick. Am I insane for thinking this is like one of the best values on the board for the entire NFL preseason?
No. I will say that I do like that action on Miami.
Yeah.
Before I get to Miami, the New York Jets, Bills fans, if I'm sitting at home and I see the news the last couple of days that they're going to be on Hard Knocks, oh my gosh, I was celebrating
Yes.
that as much as I could, because now you're going to not only have Aaron Rodgers under the microscope and how he's interacting with people, but Robert Saleh. Like sometimes this puts more pressure on the coaches to have their whole deal. I mean, Hugh Jackson in Cleveland a couple years ago just melted down with that whole operation on Hard Knocks. And Robert Saleh is a good coach, and I think he's done a really good job. I think guys like playing for him. But now, like, it's so much more pressure when now you have the guy that's supposed to put you over the top. They have a great defense, but can they stay a great defense? That's always a question year to year. They have really good players. Offensively, they've done a lot of good things, but when you're crowning a team that's going to put out a almost 40-year-old quarterback to be the savior, and he didn't look great last year, that's big trouble. Miami, on the other hand, they went out, and we've talked about this in the podcast so much. Vic Fangio, you cannot understate how important an addition that is. On top of now getting Jalen Ramsey, the Jalen Ramsey piece is one thing, but I think they're going to be better in their front seven, which is going to make potentially Jalen Ramsey even more. And plus, he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder after what happened last season. And so he's probably going to want to prove things. And when Tua's healthy, they're great. And so they're going to be, I think, the number one problem in this division for the Bills. They both have really tough schedules. I think it's going to come down to the last week. But to your point, plus 125 for a team that I think you can make an argument has the strongest roster in the NFL, or at least in the top 5, against a Miami Dolphins team that still hasn't gotten over the edge. And even last year, if you go back and watch that game in Buffalo against Miami, they had every opportunity to win that game. Tyreek Hill drops, Jalen Waddle drops, Tua just missing on throws. It gets hard in December in this division. And don't count out the Patriots from being a really annoying pest in this division. The defense is going to be better. If Mac Jones is just average, consistently average, they're going to be a pest in this division.
All right. Before we let you get out of here, I do want to ask you about Josh Allen, because we talked about him at the top of the show before Brinson abruptly left us there. It seems like he's going to do better this year. We look at some of his regular season props, passing yards, 4,300.5 is the line. Regular season touchdown passes, 32.5. Rushing touchdowns, 6.5. How are you betting Josh Allen ahead of the season?
Well, first and foremost, I really like the over on the passing yards. Like, I think with this offense, if people stay healthy and the adjustments that they're set to make, and I think if Ken Dorsey takes a step in year 2, like, I think you kind of really crush that number. You always got to take the over on rushing touchdowns. He is just the weapon. I don't care what he says. I don't care what anybody in the coaching staff, the front office says. When they get down in the red zone, the dude sees red. And sometimes it's not even like a scripted play. It's like he sees something, I'm going. And I wonder sometimes how much that frustrates Diggs, if maybe there's plays to be had for him and Allen just like goes into fullback mode and just pisses everybody off. But including Brandon Beane, who I've heard, and he's actually said this, you can hear him if you sit close enough to the box, the suite they sit in during the game, screaming when Josh Allen runs with the ball and takes big hits.
He's like, get down!
Yes, get down. I think there was one game where him and Terry Pagula, you could hear both of them going back and forth. It's pretty funny. But I really like both of those numbers. And I just think this is going to be a more efficient offense. I think Ken Dorsey is going to have more answers when teams take things away, because I think he has more weapons. I mean, there's no excuses. Also, sneaky, this offensive line is going to be better, I think. Connor McGovern, I've watched a lot of him. He is a superb upgrade on an old Roger Saffold. I love the signing when they brought in Saffold. He was just too old. He gave up 42 pressures last year, bunch of sacks. He was a real problem on the interior. If you now have a really good young pass blocking left guard there, and maybe the rookie who some considered the best guard in the draft, and Osiris Torrance at right guard, between Pro Bowlers Mitch Morse, Deion Dawkins at left tackle, and then you hope Spencer Brown, the project, kind of figures things out this year. I think their offensive line is going to be better. So they should be better everywhere, and they still have Josh Allen, like we said.
Well, all signs point to overs for Josh Allen then. Thank you so much for joining us today, Matt Parrino. You can check out his articles on Syracuse.com. You can also follow him on @Matt Parrino on Twitter. And thank you so much again for being on with us today and talking Bills. And make sure that you stay tuned for more from our All 32 series with daily drops in your podcast feed and on YouTube. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching this video. And again, Matt, thank you so much. I personally have bet on Bills futures the last couple years, and they've burned me. But maybe I got to get back on the horse. Maybe I got to get back on the horse.
Ride it back.
I always say I don't give fantasy or betting advice. I just give you betting hints that often are wrong. So sorry.
Appreciate that. All right. Thanks.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Take care.